Um, our company is StEPS, and we've got about 27 years of experience in guidance and counseling students for UK admissions. We do university support, we do career coaching, as well as CV cover letter and LinkedIn enhancement for students and for professionals. I'm the founder and the CEO, and I'm a Warwick alumna. I did my master's in TESOL from Warwick, and I started working with the university uh, to support them with their international recruitment back in 1997. And since then, I've been supporting other universities and as well as providing a lot of independent guidance counseling to students and parents and professionals. Um, and I come from a background of academia, English language teaching, teacher training, leadership, human development in general, and working with teenagers and parents is one of the core works that I do because it's something that I really enjoy. And also because when I was a teenager, I had nobody to guide me. So for me, I think it's very, very important that every teenager gets to get guidance from not only their family, but also from external sources who can give them a wider range of information. We have in our company, we have a few partner universities, very selected partner universities. And for those, we have free support as well. And some of our support is with a small registration fee, but that's only if you know exactly which university you're applying for and you want very specific guidance about that university or their courses. We also arrange a lot of events for our partner universities where we introduce you to their admissions teams, to their academics, so that you can get information from them directly as well. And then we can also support you. And then we have some premium services which are not paid for by our universities and they are paid for by the parents. And these involve a deeper dive into any of the support that is needed, which could include researching universities for you, helping you fit your CV, mentoring, guiding on the university essays, as well as scholarship essays and submitting applications on behalf of students. Generally, that happens if it's not through the school or if there are foundation applications involved, which are not, again, going through the school's UCAS account. Any other accommodation advice, pre-departure guidance, and all of these services could be for any of our universities. It could be for partner universities, it could be for non-partner universities, but these are kind of deeper dive, more hand-holding, more mentoring than what the regular services for our partner universities involve. And of course, if there's deeper reviews into the visa application, then that's also something that we offer. But if there are complicated visa cases, then we would advise you to speak to an immigration consultant because obviously we are not immigration consultants. Now coming to why we're all here. How many of you have heard of the changes in UCAS for 2026? You can unmute your mics and speak or put it in the chat. There are some changes coming for the personal statement in 2026. So let's see how much you know. Omar, great. What have you heard? And Samrina, what have you heard? Advik, um, can you share what you
I've
think?
heard that it's been split into like 3 questions now, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's been split to 3 questions. Samrina has heard that the personal statement is gone. Actually, that's not really the case. And that's why we thought it was important to have this session. So the personal statement hasn't gone. The personal statement is still very much there. It's just been split into 3 questions. Earlier, it used to be one big block of 4,000 characters, and there were guidelines on what to include in it, but there were no specific questions that were given. So what's happened now is that they have become more specific in the instructions. The purpose remains the same. The purpose of the personal statement is still that it is your chance to stand out in the application process um, and to showcase your passion, your enthusiasm, and your commitment to the subject that you want to study, not necessarily, definitely not the university that you want to study in, but the subject that you want to study. It also highlights your talents and experiences, and it must be related to the course. So that's a core difference between the UCAS personal statement and an American Common App personal statement, because the American essays do not necessarily have to be related to the course, whereas the UK essay must be related to the course. And of course, it has to be in your own words, which means what? Who cannot write it for you? Any ideas? What are all the places where students go to get support on their personal statement or get guidance on their personal statement? So for example, one place would be a consultant like us, like me, or a coach like me who would be helping a student with their personal statement. What are the other sources where students can get support, which is legitimate and it's allowed and it's something that universities do encourage you to do? Would be the parents, the teachers. Those are places where students can go to get some support for their personal statement. Also AI, and we're going to talk about AI in a minute. So students do go to AI to get support as well. Now, all these sources are very valid sources of support, whether it's your parents or your teachers or an external counselor or a school counselor or a friend or a cousin or AI. But there, all this support has to be taken with a word of caution. Uh, what can be the problem when we're taking support from parents, teachers, or external counselors like myself? What should you be careful about? Any ideas? No, nobody has any opinions on that? If you're taking support from somebody who's very experienced, who knows a lot about personal statements, or who's an elder person, uh, yeah, so absolutely, Omar. Good point. There's lack of authenticity, and it there can be a risk that it doesn't give a personalized view, especially when you've got people who take over your personal statement, or they're people who will say, pay us this much and we will write your personal statement for you. So the amount of families who come to me, if I had $1 for every family that came to me and said, oh, so you will write our child's personal statement, won't you? I would be a millionaire by now, because I have to turn people away and say, I'm sorry, I will not write your child's personal statement because your child knows himself or herself. I will guide your child on how to write it. I will show them how to write it. I will critique it. I will give it back. I will ask them to come back with a draft, but I will not write it for them. And there will be lots of people who will write it for you. So please be wary of that. Similarly, there's personal statements that I read and I can tell immediately that these are written by parents or that these are written by the teachers, or at least these have a very strong element of what the teacher wants them to write, because a couple of questions with the student and it's very clear that they're not sure what they've written. And AI is the worst of all, because the AI actually gives you information that can be incorrect. And just to give you an example, so after we'd made this presentation today, Anam and I were working on it for the last few days. And we said, okay, let's just go into ChatGPT or Claude or one of the AI engines to just sort of see what's out there about the personal statement, because we also wanted to see what is it that students are seeing. Guess what it told us? The AI told us that the personal statement has been changed and it now has 4 questions. What is the problem with that?
That is false.
That is false. It has 3 questions. And it actually gave us 4 questions. And it actually gave us samples for those 4 questions and responses for those 4 questions. But the main premise was wrong because there are no 4 questions. So it actually made up its own questions that do not match the questions that UCAS has. So, so that's a and it gives you information in such an authoritative way as if it knows everything because it's coming up with the examples, it's coming up with the samples, it's also coming up with warnings and saying, be careful not to do this. But it's all based on the initial information is wrong. So you really need to be very careful when you're using AI, and you need to know your information before you go to AI to check. So, and that's always my word of caution. AI is not the enemy. AI is a support, but you please use it with a word with a pinch of salt and with caution. It's the same as Google, right? If you put in the wrong keywords, you'll get the wrong information, or it'll lead you to the wrong site. And you need to be aware whether this is a fake site or this is a genuine site. In the same way, you need to be aware whether the information being given to you by AI is incorrect information, false, fake, or actually genuine. So that's really important. And of course, the words that are coming out of AI, as Omar said, there's lack of authenticity, lack of ingenuity. So you have to be very careful with that. That you can resonate with the words and what it's saying. Why is the personal statement important? Further, uh, generally, if you're applying to the competitive universities, for every 10 places, there are over 100 applications. So if you're looking at places like Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, Imperial, Warwick, uh, for all these UCL, for all these top universities, there'd be at least 100 applications for 10 places. And out of those 100, possibly 90% would meet the entry requirements. So how do you stand out? So you stand out the way this chap is standing out. Your personal statement is your chance to stand out. Um, where is the personal statement used, or when is it used? It can be used in the first review. If you meet all the entry requirements, you've got the GCSE grades, you've got the predicted grades, they want to check, do you really have the motivation for the course? Are you a good fit for the course? It can be used in an interview. Uh, if the course has an interview, they will refer to your personal statement and they will ask you questions related to what you've claimed in the personal statement. It can also be after the interview. Maybe they've done the interview and they're still not sure. They may refer back to the personal statement to see whether you should choose candidate A or candidate B, because both performed really well in the interview. So that might be the tiebreaker. And also at confirmation or clearing time, if you missed your offer, and at that point, the university is saying, should they decline you, reject you, or should they make you an offer? At that time, they will look at your personal statement again. And of course, if you, going into clearing to a new university that you did not apply to before, that at that time, again, they will quickly have a look at your personal statement also. They can or they cannot. It depends on every university, depending on how much pressure they have in clearing also. So there will be universities who will perhaps not look at it at all as well. So I often have parents who will come to me and say, oh, well, XYZ university came to our school and they actually said they don't look at personal statements. And maybe they don't. Maybe for some courses they don't. But there is still a lot of value to the personal statement, because there will be so many universities who will be looking at it, and they will be looking at it at different stages of the application, especially between two very close calls. That is where your personal statement will make the difference. What should the personal statement, what are the admission tutors looking for? What should your personal statement really be showcasing? It's your enthusiasm for the subject, why you're applying, uh, what your aims are, do you have relevant skills, work experience or not? Uh, how have you contributed to life at school? What are your extracurricular interests? And evidence. Anything that you're saying, anything that you're claiming, what is the evidence for it? They're looking for that. They don't want just a list of sort of achievements and a list of things that you've done, because they don't want a CV in paragraph form. They're really trying to get an idea of you as a person. And that's why it's called a personal statement. And that's why if your parents write it, or AI writes it, or I write it, it's not personal. Uh, Primarily, they're looking for two things. Are you choosing the right course? And are you actually prepared for UK degree level study? You know, what does it mean when they say, are you choosing the right course? Do you understand what it means to study law? Do you understand what kind of teaching methods there would be? Do you understand what are the different career options that are out there that you might want? Um, Whether it's law or whatever, I've just taken law as an example. In the same way, are you prepared to study independently? Are you prepared to live independently? Are you self-motivated, or will you need somebody to constantly push you? Because if you will, then you are not ready for studying in the UK. So those are the kind of two things that they really need to see. Um, how much information should you give? Uh, there are word limits to the personal statement. Does anybody know what the word limit is to the UCAS personal statement? Any volunteers?
No, I'm not sure.
Word limit, character count?
4,000 characters.
4,000 characters, absolutely. So it used to be 4,000 characters, and it is still 4,000 characters, even with the three questions. It is still 4,000 characters or 47 lines. I'm not sure if it's still 47 lines, because they don't refer to the lines yet. But maybe as we get closer to the application deadline, we'll have more detail. But it is still definitely 4,000 characters. The difference is now that each of the questions requires minimum 350 characters written about it. And we're going to look at that in a minute. So keep to the word limit. Set yourself limits to the sections as well, if you want, because you don't want one of those questions to be too long and the other one to be just barely 350 characters. Be selective in the amount of information you're using, or what information you're using. Sometimes I'll have students who have a lot of information to give, and they remove a lot of the information from the personal statement because they feel that they're not able to talk about all of it in 4,000 characters. And I always tell them, start with all the information. Don't remove the information in the first instance. So when they come to me and they start writing the draft, maybe 3 months down my engagement with them, I'll find out, oh, there's this as well that they haven't talked about. And it turns out that perhaps what they were thinking they should delete, they should not even bother including, is actually the one that piece of information that's actually very, very interesting and would make for very good content within the personal statement. And I'm like, I wish I'd known this before, because now we're almost ready to apply. So start with all the information that you have, and then gradually you can trim it down. Don't um, don't just dismiss information from the start because you feel, oh, well, I don't have the space to write about it. So do include it, and then you can try to find ways. And that's really where, somebody who's an expert in writing and especially working with personal statements that's where people like us can help you to say, okay, without sacrificing the information, how do we keep to the word limit? And but do not, be selective in what you're saying, and also in the amount of detail you're giving. Sometimes people start with from when they were 3 years old, and then, give all the information in a chronological order. That might be okay at the start when you're starting and when you're drafting. But then when you actually start writing about it, then it's important to, because you want to pack in as much as possible and as few words as possible, it's important to let go of some details without losing the crux of the matter. Use appropriate language. Uh, don't use a lot of slang. Don't use too many abbreviations, because that's not going to go down well. Also be aware of using British spelling as opposed to American spelling because you're applying to a UK university, and edit, 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 edit. Don't worry that you're having to remove things. You can keep a first draft, or you can keep one draft and edit the other draft. So you can always go back to the first one and put in things that you've removed. But the number of every time you read your personal statement, you will find places where you can improve it. So don't worry if you have to make a lot of changes to it. And also don't show it to a lot of people. I sometimes get students who write their personal statement. I encourage that I encourage them to show it to their parents, and I encourage them to show it to their counselors once it's done, but not necessarily every draft. Because what happens then? What happens when at every stage you're consulting a lot of people? You can consult one or two core people, but not too many people across all stages. What happens if you consult too many people through your personal statement writing? You're showing it to friends, you're showing it to two or three different teachers, you've got a counselor, or you're showing it to perhaps me, you're showing it to your mother and your father. What happens then? Any ideas? What can be a risk? No ideas. Okay, we've got something in the chat. Thank you. Um, Again, too much confusion, too many different responses. Because a personal statement it's very personal and it's also very subjective. So people would be giving you opinion based on maybe something they've read. Or they'd say, I often have students who come to me, and say, but Miss Saima, I read somebody's personal statement and they have written about this. So maybe I should write about this also. And I say, well, they've written about this because that's them. You haven't had that experience. So don't doubt yourself. Absolutely, Irfan. We doubt ourselves and we feel, maybe we can do it better. And people will say, I actually had a candidate for Cambridge last year. She had an amazing personal statement. We'd gone over it two, three times. It was really genuine. It was really her. And she took it to her school, and a school counselor made it change it all. And she made it like really heavy and very, very, very intellectual. Uh, Made her read last minute read books that she had not read before, and she got rejected because it just wasn't her. It was the counselor sort of pushing things onto her that she had to talk about and she had to write about, whereas this student had spent like months working on her personal statement, and then in 2 days it was changed. So be very careful. It's like your personal uh, life. I went to university 27 years ago. I still sometimes go back to my personal statement and think, yeah, I can see why they admitted me. It did make sense at that time a lot. So it's very personal to you, and it should resonate with you, not necessarily with everybody else. uh yeah, it was the society who changed her life. So yeah, I mean, she's now she's at a very, very good university in the US. But Cambridge was her dream. So yeah, uh let's now look at, of course, the changes that we are all here for. If you're applying for 2025 entry, you, and these applications for 2025 are still open. So if anybody is here who wants to apply for 2025 entry, applications are open till June 30th, 2025. You can still apply, but the old format will apply, not the new format. Uh, and why has the format changed? Um, the questions are now more structured. The idea is to help applicants express themselves more effectively, and there's a clear starting point. Whereas earlier it was very open and students could get lost in that a bit. Um, so 3 questions, as we already discussed. The first is, why do you want to study this course or this subject? What do you think this will include? What do you think they will want to hear in this? What does it mean when they say, why do you want to study this course or subject? Can I have the students respond as well, please? What would you write in the why question? You can unmute your mics if you don't want to write, or write if you don't want to unmute. Guys, you'll have to be quicker than that. We only have an hour.
I think you'd mention what this subject means to you. Like, what exactly do you get out of doing this subject? Like, maybe what are some past experiences you've had with this subject that were, that meant a lot to you, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Advik. So yeah, just your motivation for the subject. Why does the subject excite you? And we'll look at that in a bit. The second question is, how have your qualifications and studies helped you prepare for this course or subject? What do you think you're going to put in here? What do they need to see in this response? Your qualifications and studies. Will you list your qualification? Will you tell them what you're studying specifically? Because to show how, physics, chemistry, biology have helped you prepare for a degree in medicine? Or what do they want to see? Any ideas? Right, wrong, doesn't matter. So the one thing they don't want to see is they don't want you to list your subjects for the sake of it, because why not? Why should you not be just telling them these are my subjects?
I suppose the transcript already has it, so there's no point in
absolutely. Absolutely. So the application form already says what subjects you're studying, right? So you can mention the subjects, but they have to be in the context of what you've gained from those subjects, what extra reading, research you've done through those subjects. That's really what they want to see. And what have you learned from it? So not just I've done this, I've studied this, I've studied this. They don't want you to list the chapters in your biology or your politics textbook. They really want to know how you've engaged with it. How do you connect it with maybe what's happening in the real world? How do you connect your studies to research that you've done, or any other books that you've read, or any
How you against your lesson to the real life and how you gonna find out how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. How do you see that it connects to real life? How does it, how and also how will it help you in the course? The studies that you've done, how do they connect to what you want to study as well? And then the third is, what have you done to prepare yourself outside of education? Now, that doesn't relate to your subjects. What does that relate to?
Like supercurriculars and
Your extracurriculars, your supercurriculars, also, what else? So what would be extracurricular? Give me some ideas of extracurriculars. What could potentially be extracurriculars? Name one extracurricular that each of you do.
like a leadership role in school.
Yeah, that's an extracurricular, leadership role in school, basketball, football, music, drama, all of those are extracurriculars. What would be supercurriculars?
Maybe like a competition you've run that's related to what you want to study.
Yeah, a competition you've run, any work experience that you've had, any internship that you've had, any online courses that you've been enrolled in, any MOOCs that you've attended, all of those are supercurriculars. So all of that is outside of your education. It's not something that you're being assessed on, but it's something you've done voluntarily to learn more about the subject and to give yourself more exposure. So as I said earlier, the character limit total is 4,000, including spaces, and minimum 350 per question. You can, of course, write more than 350 characters per question, but try to balance out. And this is kind of the breakdown of each of the three questions. The first one, why? your reasons. Why have you chosen this course? What motivates you? What are your goals? What do you envision for yourself? Why will this course help you? Where are you going with this course? The second is your qualifications. What have you studied? What have you achieved in your studies? What research have you done? And as Irfan said, how does that connect to this course and the sort of real world application of those subjects? And then the super and extracurricular. When you're responding to any of these questions, as with the old personal statement, we recommend that you use the STAR approach or the ABC approach. And I'm going to show you both. So the STAR approach is you describe a situation, what was the task that you did, you demonstrate what is the action that was taken, and then you talk about the result of that action. So, whilst volunteering, this would obviously be the third question. Whilst volunteering at a primary school, I work with students as a tutor and mentor, providing mathematics support for students. I work with a small group of primary school students using resources and materials to provide an overview of a topic. Through these resources, I develop communication skills, breaking down a subject and providing examples. The students improve their understanding of subject areas, resulting in them achieving higher marks in the maths test. You could start with something like this and then trim it down for brevity because it's a lot of words, especially in the A and R parts. But this is kind of like demonstrates a STAR approach. Or you could use an ABC approach where you talk about an action, what you've done, maybe your academic achievements, your volunteer experience, work experience. What were the benefits of that action or task, and how does it connect to the course? Okay, so for example, I volunteered at an animal shelter, organizing events and caring for animals. This taught me communication, organization, and problem-solving skills. These will help me succeed in your veterinary program or in a veterinary program and reach my goal of becoming a veterinarian. So A, B, C, very clear. Sometimes you can cluster one or two activities and benefits and then make a common connection as well. So you don't always have to be like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, because it also gets monotonous. So we can change it around to make the essay more easy to read, but that's kind of later when you're editing it. But to start with, this is what you should be thinking of when you're drafting. Now let's look at these question by question. So for question 1, why do you want to study this course or subject? We're going to look at your passion for the subject, what draws you to it, why is it interesting, your current or future goals. We talked about linking it to current developments, future aspirations as well. You can also talk about a problem that you've seen, so a gap in knowledge, a gap in implementation, and you want to fix that. And it could also be any personal experience or moment that sparked your interest. So it could be all of these or a few of these in question 1. Now let's look at a few examples. So that's one example. The focus on sustainable design within the architecture course aligns with my goal to achieve environmentally responsible buildings. Another one, the opportunity to study developmental psychology in depth will prepare me for my aspiration to work in child therapy. And I've always loved English and want to study it more. How would you rank these? Which ones are good? Which ones are not? Architecture, psychology, English. Let's say if you had to remove one, which one would you remove? Architecture, psychology, English. Which is the weakest one? English. Why is that the weakest? Vidu. Vidu, could you unmute and say what? Tell me why English is the weakest? You love it. You've always wanted to study it. Why is it the weakest?
Hi, Saima. Hi.
Hi.
No, I feel, no, it's not that, of course, if somebody's loving English and you want to study, but the way it's been put, I think it needs to be a little more elaborative. that, talks about your specific interest of the language. It could be literature or some other aspect.
Yeah,
So, to my understanding, I think this English was not very aptly put the way it should have been.
yeah. Uh, Absolutely. It's far too basic. Irfan, do you want to share how you think it could be improved?
Uh, well, I think that guidance I will
If
take from you,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
apparently it
Irfan,
appeared, but
yeah.
this is not how.
Irfan's got a good comment there in the chat. He said it doesn't describe the personal attachment to the subject. Just, anybody can claim I've always loved English. There's no evidence. What have you done in English? What is it about English that you love? So as Vidu said, no further detail. So absolutely. Uh, let's look at a few more. The intersection of quantum computing and cryptography fascinates me, particularly how Shor's algorithm challenges traditional encryption methods. After reading Dubliners by James Joyce, I became intrigued by how modernist literature reflected social change in early 20th century Europe. So that's a literature one. Biology is really interesting and I like learning about it. Same situation,
Again,
right?
I think it's the same. Yes,
It's the
it's
same.
not
Yeah.
talking in depth about the subject that you
Exactly.
specifically want to focus
Exactly.
on. Yes.
So think when you start writing, and when I'm working with the students, because I work with students normally over a whole year. So most students will sign up with me, say now, and then we work with them till 15th October or 15th January till they're ready to submit. And when I ask them, why do you want to study this subject? They're like, well, I really enjoy it. It's really interesting and I like learning about it. But they're not really able to articulate why. So you really need to think about why. And that's really what's going to get you to expand on your motivation. And a lot of students will be like, I want to do it because my father's a lawyer or my father's a banker, or, I've always watched my mom uh, do this work or be a doctor. And that's why I'm inspired to be a doctor, which is great. But then you really need to dig deeper into, okay, so that sparked your initial interest, but then what do you know about it that you can talk about? So absolutely, the first two are very strong because they actually show that you've made the effort to understand about these subjects and dig deeper into them. We've got a few more fleshed out examples. Let's have a look at these. 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to ask everybody to vote. Put in a number in the chat box. This is a difficult one. Okay, Fran's got example 2. Samrina's got example 2. Let's have a few more. Let's have some new people as well. Maybe more students. Omar, example 2 as well. Kutsia as well. Okay, so 2 seems to be the winner. Okay, Veer, why do you think it's 2?
I think it's two because the first one focuses on their own subjects that they're studying, and the person reviewing their application will already know the subjects they're doing. And the second one shows like deeper, like personal connection with the thing, as it shows how they're like interested in possibly designing solutions towards global challenges.
And why not the third?
Third one's strong as well, but I feel like second and third are like close.
Mm-hmm.
Second one is has a bit more personal connection than the third, but the third one is still like
Yeah,
quite good.
yeah. I mean, they're all strong. They're all pretty strong. But absolutely, the second is the best, primarily because it gives that personal connection. It talks about a contribution to society. It's structured, and it doesn't mention the A-level subjects. There's no harm in mentioning the A-level subjects like the third one has done. because it's found a common core. So the third one is said strong foundation in math, physics, and computing has equipped me with the skills. Why I don't like the third one is because the first sentence is very generic. What skills? It, had it said it's equipped me with, say, the analytical skills to pursue an engineering degree, then it would have, then you think, well, math, physics, computing, all three have analytical skills. So they've actually found that commonality. Otherwise, the skills is very generic. Every subject gives you some skills or the other, right? So that's what I don't like about the third. For the first one, what I don't like about it, again, it says this project allowed me to apply my knowledge in physics and maths in practical ways. It doesn't really say what ways. It's very, very generic. I further honed my skills through A levels in math and physics. Again, I mean, math and physics is repeated once here, once here. What skills have been honed? And top marks in problem solving assignments, that's fine. I'm eager to continue my studies at university. Of course, that's why you're applying. So you don't really have to say that. Remember, we're very short on words. So we really need to choose each word, each sentence very carefully, where we're not wasting words by stating the obvious. And the second one is the best because it talks about what they've excelled in without necessarily listing the subjects. It says what they've actually done, and that it's the desire to study mechanical engineering for what? What will that engineering degree help them to do? So it actually, expands on each, and there's a very personal connection. So well done for identifying the strongest one. Otherwise, on the face of it, all three of them look nice. They're well fleshed out, they're detailed, but this one has more meat in it. Let's think of yourself. And if you were to think of your personal interests related to the subject you want to study. So if you can, again, in the chat box or unmute your mics, just write down the subject that you want to study. And also think of, I'm not going to necessarily ask you in the interest of time what your interests are, but think of one specific aspect of your subject that fascinates you. Make a note of it or put it in the chat as I go along. We're going to, and at the end, I'm going to give you a worksheet to do. Okay, computer animation and gaming, Irfan is saying, and one aspect of computer animation and gaming that fascinates you, and why does it do that? Just think about it and hold that thought, okay? So that's really, remember, for question number one, they want to see your passion, they want to see your inspiration. That's really question number one. Great. So you've got some options coming into the chat, and you can keep them coming. We can look at them at the end. Now coming to question number two. How have your qualifications and studies helped you prepare for this course and subject? Earlier, you were talking about how your subjects, perhaps, because they had talked about, and that's one thing I forgot to mention actually, let me go back. In these ones, remember, we are talking about question number one. So they don't really need you to talk about your subjects just yet. Subjects should come in question number two anyway. So that's also why example 1 and 3 are not very strong, because they're wasting space in question 1 talking about the subjects, whereas that's really supposed to come in question 2. So it's in the wrong place. Okay. So let's look at question 2. This is where you need to talk about your qualifications and studies. So talk about the subjects that will align with your course of interest. What skills have those subjects given you? How are they directly related to the course that you want to study? And why are these skills great for the course? How do they make you a good candidate? And then what are your achievements? So if you saw in the previous example 1 was talking about a lot of these things, but it was in the wrong place as well. Also in the wrong manner because there was repetition. Let's look at some examples. So relevant courses, these are shorter ones. I studied advanced math to develop my problem solving and analytical skills. Through my group projects in history, I honed my teamwork and leadership skills. I took part in a research project. You could talk about your EPQs, you could talk about your extended essays, whatever, and what you gained from that. Let's look at, again, similar to what we said before, the first one, not very fleshed out. It just says, this is what I've done. They already know it from your application form. Here, they're actually talking about what they've learned from it, what the student has gained from it, and connected biology and chemistry as well. Let's look at these three examples. Which one is the strongest here? You can put it in the chat or you can unmute. Okay, we've got some examples coming in. Number 3, Samrina is saying is the strongest. Let's have one or two more, and then we'll identify why. Okay, everybody's saying third. Somebody who hasn't spoken yet. Okay, let's have Vidu. Vidu, do you want to tell us why it's the third?
It's a third because, to my understanding, when you're talking about the interest in the subject, it is not only about your theoretical knowledge, but it is also about the practical aspect of how you have evolved the understanding of that particular subject that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
Samrina,
I
do you
feel that
have
third seems to be more relevant.
It absolutely is. Is anything else that was weak in 1 and 2? Samrina, do you have any opinions? Omar?
I think compared to example 3, it lacks the flow. It lacks the ability to break down the subjects in a manner that seems more authentic. And example 3, I think, just does that better than the other two.
Yeah, and also I think the language used in example 1 and 2, apart from, of course, the core ideas, which are definitely more stronger, more authentic, more relevant, and to actual application in example 3. Also, the language used in examples 1 and 3 is weaker, and yeah, and more basic. One is very basic. I mean, it says things like, overall, these subjects have given me skills that I believe will help me in an engineering degree. Is that even needed to be said? Specifically, again, what skills? Which was an interesting experience. That's very vague. So I just feel in 1 and 2, it's kind of very wishy-washy. In 2, it says, I noticed that mathematical modeling is sometimes used in physics and that precision can be important. It's, you need more than just notice something, so avoid vocabulary that is sometimes, perhaps, be more intentional in what you're saying. So that's also a weakness in 1 and 2, apart from the fact that they're not so connected to application of in real life. So yeah. These are some subject-specific examples that are good practice or good samples. So just have a look at these. Anything, one piece of advice though, I know that a lot of you will be going online to look for sample essays, and you'll find examples like these. Just try to unsee them once you've read them, because the reason why I'm showing this is for you to have an idea what the structure should be like, not what the idea should be. So when I have students who I'm coaching, one of the first questions after, can you write it for us? One of the first questions is, will you give us samples and I say, no, I do not give samples. There are loads of samples on the internet. If you want to see them, I would suggest you don't see them. Just look at the structure. Don't worry about the content. Again, the content has to come from you. What you learn, the analytical skills that you learn from math, or what you gain from those analytical skills, will be very different from what your friend has gained through those analytical skills, or how your friend has developed those analytical skills. So it has to be very, very personal to you. Um, and and of course, you want to avoid plagiarism as well. And that's the same problem with AI as well. It's generative AI. It will generate its responses based on what people have inputted. So be very careful. And most importantly, do not ever submit your personal statement to ChatGPT to do a plagiarism check. Because once you've done it, the next time somebody asks, what you have inputted will also come out. So it takes its corpus from what we are inputting to it. So yeah, and then your second question again, your studies. We are going to, actually, I don't think we have time for this, Anam. We were going to do it. We were going to actually do an activity to connect your knowledge and your skills, but I don't think we'll have the time. So I'm going to just skip that. But the idea is, for each subject that you're studying, Anam can put that in the, Anam, if you can put that in the chat, and then students, as they have time, they can do it. And once, if you fill that out, then you can book a meeting with me for a one-to-one session to go over what you've entered. And then I can guide you, and in more personalized way as well. And that's going to be a free session that you can book with me just because you've attended this session. So the idea is, think of the subject that you have studied. Think of just one subject for now. It could be math, it could be history, whatever one subject. For that subject, identify the key skills or knowledge that you've gained, and then link it to your future studies, just like we had seen in the previous example. And then you can book a meeting with me. When you fill that out, I will get your form, and Anam will then invite you to send you my calendar link. You can book a meeting with me to actually flesh that out more, or any other questions that you may have. And now question 3, which is your extracurriculars and your supercurriculars. What have you done outside of your studies? Let me just quickly look at the chat as well. So extracurricular would be your volunteer works, any jobs, any supercurriculars as well. The extracurricular tends to be a generic term. How have these contributed to your growth and preparation for university life? That's really important. Remember, I had said in the beginning that they're essentially looking for 2 things. Do you understand what you want to study and why? And are you prepared to come to university? Are you mature enough to come to university? They need to see both of these. And then how do these skills transfer into your chosen course as well? Extracurricular is generally any of these, journals, newspaper reading, summer programs, taster courses, independent study projects, any music, dance, theater, hobbies, club societies, traveling, blogging, influence, if you're an influencer, whatever. All of these would be extracurricular if they add value to your life and to your personal development. And supercurricular could be things like your EPQ, which is academic, but can also be considered supercurricular. Any research, perhaps. Sometimes students do, paid research attachments, or paid internships, any kind of maybe learnings that you've had through online, on either social media or podcasts or documentaries, etc. So more things that are actual learning. And these are some examples of your question 3 responses. You know what to do. The chat box is there. Let's have those numbers in the chat. Okay, so 1 seems to be the winner. Who's going to volunteer? Anybody? Why 1? Just unmute. Fastest fingers to unmute. Come on, guys, we have 3 minutes left. I need quicker responses.
Yeah, hi Saima. I
Yes,
would
Vidhu,
like to
yes.
speak on this.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
I think it's number 1 because the choice of the course is, gelling very well with the extracurricular activity that the, child has done over the year.
Yeah,
So there is a perfect, correlation and coordination between the extracurricular and the, desired subject.
Yes, absolutely. So that's
So this
a
is
very
what I
strong
understand.
point. And of course, remember, all your extracurriculars will not be directly connected. You can be showing skills. Remember, you have 350 is your minimum word
Exactly.
limit.
Yeah. Yes.
You have
Yes.
more as well. So some of them can be not directly connected, but then you will show the skills as well. Why are 2 and 3 weak?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Irfan. It's engaging, very understandable to read. 2 is again very vague. The vocabulary gave me good knowledge about engineering, so we try to avoid words that are insipid in their nature as well, that are not very concrete. And also, it's again, it doesn't really connect very well to the skills that have been learned. 3 is slightly more fleshed out, but also not very positive. Some of the vocabulary used is again very vague and very wishy-washy as well. So that's really not. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong. It shouldn't be example 3. It should actually be example 1. So I think Anam, I think you mixed up the icons. So it's actually example 1. Let's look at this. Actually, I don't think we have time, so I'm just going to go ahead. So yeah, so as I'll just show it to you quickly. So here, example 3 is the best because although it's the shortest, it's also the most concrete. And, obviously we've left these blank, but whatever it is, you can see that it's actually doing the same as 2 is doing, but it's more to the point. Here, it's just too long. The article made me realize that the situation is a lot more complicated than I initially thought. It made me question if simply providing that's too much. So 3 says it in a much more concise manner. As we come to the end, just a few tips. Be yourself. Use positive and enthusiastic language. Remember, your first question is your motivation, passion. So by the time you come to the third question, that passion should still be visible. Try to stand out in a good way. Always use evidence. Don't just make claims. Remember the ABC approach or the STAR approach. If there are any gaps in knowledge, if there's something you want to learn about more, talk about it. And of course, from the sort of organization and the actual logistics part, double check your spelling, ask for help where you're stuck, draft, redraft, keep your sentences short and concise. If their sentences are long, try not to have 2 or 3 very long sentences back to back. If one sentence is very long, because that's how it sounds better, make the other sentence short. And be honest, don't make up stuff because you'll get caught out. And don't also use quotes and cliches for the sake of it. Sometimes it's nice to start with a quote or to have a quote somewhere in between, but it has to really make sense. And don't just find a quote because you want to insert it in your essay. Don't list achievements or subjects or activities. Don't use language to flatter people. I'm really interested in studying in the UK because of its long, rich history of educational excellence. They don't want to know that. They already know they're good. So you don't need to flatter. Avoid humor as well. Why? Why is humor to be avoided?
Because that would make you sound very casual. And,
No. I mean,
so
the
I
idea,
think,
it's not about that. Sometimes humor can fall very well, but sometimes humor can fall flat on its face because you don't know who's going to be reading it. And humor can be
exactly, yeah,
very cultural, and you never know, it can also offend somebody. So unless you know who your
exactly.
humor
Yes,
is
true.
directed to, avoid it. So that's why we always say don't use humor in personal statements unless it's directed to yourself. Sometimes because it's a cute story or whatever that you're starting with, then that's fine. The problem is not that you won't be taken seriously. It's just how it is phrased. So if you're using humor, be very, very careful that you're not going to offend anybody. Okay. And also don't mention a specific university that you really want to go to. That's really very important as well, because you're applying to 5 and all 5 will see that personal statement. Each of them should feel that you really want to come to them. And don't take advice from AI. As I said before, you can get ideas, you can get, whatever. Ideally, don't get anything. And definitely, as I said to you, it's not reliable. And, just today, it was telling me there were 4 questions for the personal statement, whereas there are 3. So so be very careful. If you could